What is the Dreaming Emissary? Alien energy that has conciseness. Alien energy that purports to aid dreamers by telling them things. The problem with the Dreaming Emissary is that it can tell only what the sorcerers already know or should know. Were they worth their salt? To say that it's alien energy that has conciseness doesn't help me at all, Don Juan. What kind of energy? Benign? Malignant? Right? Wrong? What? It's just what I said. Alien energy. An impersonal force that we turn into a very personal one because it has a voice. Some sorcerers swear by it. They even see it. Or, as you yourself have done, they simply hear it as a man's or a woman's voice. And the voice can tell them about the state of things, which most of the time they take as sacred advice. Why do some of us hear it as a voice? We see it or hear it because we maintain our assemblage points fixed on a specific new position. The more intense this fixation, the more intense our experience of the emissary. Watch out! You may see it and feel it as a naked woman. Don Juan laughed at his own remark, but I was too scared for levity. Is this force capable of materializing itself? I asked. Certainly, he replied. And it all depends on how fixed the assemblage point is. But rest assured, if you are capable of maintaining a degree of detachment, nothing happens. The emissary remains what it is, an impersonal force that acts on us because of the fixation of our assemblage points. Is its advice safe and sound? It cannot be advice. It only tells us what's what. And then we draw the inferences ourselves. I told Don Juan then about what the voice had said to me. It's just like I said, Don Juan remarked. The emissary didn't tell you anything new. Its statements were correct, but it only seemed to be revealing things to you. What the emissary did was merely repeat what you already knew. I'm afraid I can't claim that I knew all that, Don Juan. Yes, you can. You now know. You know now infinitely more about the mystery of the universe than what you rationally suspect. But that's our human malady, to know more about the mystery of the universe than we suspect. Having experienced this incredible phenomenon all by myself, without Don Juan's coaching, made me feel elated. I wanted more information about the emissary. I began to ask Don Juan whether he also heard the emissary's voice. He interrupted me and with a broad smile said, "Yes, yes. The emissary also talks to me. In my youth, I used to see it as a friar with a black cowl. A talking friar. He used to scare the daylights out of me every time. Then, when my fear was more manageable, it became a disembodied voice, which tells me things to this day." What kinds of things, Don Juan? Anything I focus my intent on. Things I don't want to take the trouble of following up myself. Like, for example, details about the behavior of my apprentices, what they do when I'm not around. It tells me things about you in particular. The emissary tells me everything you do. At that point, I really did not care for the direction our conversation had taken. I frantically searched my mind for questions about other topics while he roared with laughter. Is the Dreaming Emissary an inorganic being? I asked. Let's say that the Dreaming Emissary is a force that comes from the realm of inorganic beings. This is the reason dreamers always encounter it. Do you mean, Don Juan, that every dreamer hears or sees the emissary? Everyone hears the emissary. Very few see it or feel it. Do you have any explanation for this? No. Besides, I really don't care about the emissary. At one point in my life, I had to make a decision whether to concentrate on the inorganic beings and follow in the footsteps of the Old Sorcerers, or to refuse it all. My teacher, the Nawal Julian, helped me make up my mind to refuse it. I've never regretted that decision. Do you think I should refuse the inorganic beings myself, Don Juan? He did not answer me. Instead, he explained that the whole realm of inorganic beings is always poised to teach. Perhaps because inorganic beings have a deeper consciousness than ours, they feel compelled to take us under their wings. I didn't see any point in becoming their pupil, he added. Their price is too high. What is their price? Our lives, our energy, our devotion to them. In other words, our freedom. But what do they teach? Things pertinent to their world, the same way we ourselves would teach them, if we were capable of teaching them things pertinent to our world. Their method, however, is to take our basic self as a gauge of what we need, and then teach us accordingly. A most dangerous affair. I don't see why it would be dangerous. If someone was going to take your basic self as a gauge, with all your fears and greed and envy, etc., and teach you what fulfills that horrible state of being, what do you think the result would be? I had no comeback. I thought I understood perfectly well the reasons for his rejection. The problem with the Old Sorcerers was that they learned wonderful things, but on the basis of their unadulterated lower selves. Don Juan went on. The inorganic beings became their allies, and by means of deliberate examples, they taught the Old Sorcerers marvels. Their allies performed the actions, and the Old Sorcerers were guided, step by step, to copy those actions without changing anything about their basic nature. Do these relationships with inorganic beings exist today? I can't answer that truthfully. All I can say is that I can't conceive of having a relationship like that myself. Involvements of this nature curtail our search for freedom by consuming all our available energy. In order to really follow their allies' example, the Old Sorcerers had to spend their lives in the realm of the inorganic beings. The amount of energy needed to accomplish such a sustained journey is staggering. Do you mean, Don Juan, that the Old Sorcerers were able to exist in those realms like we exist here? Not quite like we exist here, but certainly they lived. They retained their awareness, their individuality. The Dreaming Emissary became the most vital entity for those sorcerers. If a sorcerer wants to live in the realm of the inorganic beings, the emissary is the perfect bridge. It speaks, and its bent is to teach, to guide. Have you ever been in that realm, Don Juan? Countless times, and so have you. But there is no point in talking about it now. You haven't cleared all the debris from your dreaming attention yet. We'll talk about that realm someday. Do I gather, Don Juan, that you don't approve of or like the emissary? I neither approve of it nor like it. It belongs to another mood, the Old Sorcerers' mood. Besides, its teaching and guidance in our world are nonsense. And for that nonsense, the emissary charges us enormities in terms of energy. One day you will agree with me. You'll see. In the tone of Don Juan's words, I caught a veiled implication of his belief that I disagreed with him about the emissary. I was about to confront him with it when I heard the emissary's voice in my ears. He's right, the voice said. You like me because you find nothing wrong with exploring all possibilities. You want knowledge. Knowledge is power. You don't want to remain safe in the routines and beliefs of your daily world. The emissary said all that in English with a marked Pacific Coast intonation. Then it shifted into Spanish. I heard a slight Argentine accent. I'd never heard the emissary speaking like this before. It fascinated me. The emissary told me about fulfillment, knowledge, about how far away I was from my birthplace, about my craving for adventure, and my near obsession with new things, new horizons. The voice even talked to me in Portuguese, with a definite inflection from the southern Pampas. To hear that voice pouring out all this flattery not only scared me, but nauseated me. I told Don Juan right on the spot that I had to stop my dreaming training. He looked up at me, caught by surprise. But when I repeated what I had heard, he agreed I should stop. Although I sensed he was doing it only to appease me. A few weeks later, I found my reaction a bit hysterical and my decision to withdraw unsound. I went back to my dreaming practices. I was sure Don Juan was aware that I had canceled out my withdrawal. On one of my visits to him, quite abruptly, he spoke about dreams. Just because we haven't been taught to emphasize dreams as a genuine field for exploration doesn't mean they are not one, he began. Dreams are analyzed for their meaning or are taken as portents, but never are they taken as a realm of real events. To my knowledge, only the Old Sorcerers did that, Don Juan went on. But at the end, they flubbed it. They got greedy. And when they came to a crucial crossroads, they took the wrong fork. They put all their eggs in one basket. The fixation of the assemblage point on the thousands of positions it can adopt. Don Juan expressed his bewilderment at the fact that out of all the marvelous things the Old Sorcerers learned, exploring, those thousands of positions, only the art of dreaming and the art of stalking remain. He reiterated that the art of dreaming is concerned with the displacement of the assemblage point. Then he defined stalking as the art that deals with the fixation of the assemblage point on any location to which it is displaced. To fixate the assemblage point on any new spot means to acquire cohesion, he said. You have been doing just that in your dreaming practices. I thought I was perfecting my energy body, I said, somehow surprised at his statement. You are doing that and much more. You are learning to have cohesion. Dreaming does it by forcing dreamers to fixate the assemblage point. The dreaming attention, the energy body, the second attention, the relationship with inorganic beings, the dreaming emissary are but byproducts of acquiring cohesion. In other words, they are all byproducts of fixating the assemblage point on a number of dreaming positions. What is a dreaming position, Don Juan? Any new position to which the assemblage point has been displaced during sleep. How do we fixate the assemblage point on a dreaming position? By sustaining the view of any item in your dreams, or by changing dreams at will. Through your dreaming practices, you are really exercising your capacity to be cohesive. That is to say, you are exercising your capacity to maintain a new energy shape by holding the assemblage point fixed on the position of any particular dream you are having. Do I really maintain a new energy shape? Not exactly. And not because you can't, but only because you are shifting the assemblage point instead of moving it. Shifts of the assemblage point give rise to minute changes, which are practically unnoticeable. The challenge of shifts is that they are so small and so numerous that to maintain cohesiveness in all of them is a triumph. How do we know we are maintaining cohesion? We know it by the clarity of our perception. The clearer the view of our dreams, the greater our cohesion. He said then that it was time for me to have a practical application of what I had learned in dreaming. Without giving me a chance to ask anything, he urged me to focus my attention, as if I were in a dream, on the foliage of a desert tree growing nearby, a mesquite tree. Do you want me to just gaze at it? I asked. I don't want you to just gaze at it. I want you to do something very special with that foliage, he said. Remember that in your dreams, once you are able to hold the view of any item, you are really holding the dreaming position of your assemblage point. Now, gaze at those leaves as if you were in a dream, but with a slight yet most meaningful variation. You are going to hold your dreaming attention on the leaves of the mesquite tree in the awareness of our daily world. My nervousness made it impossible for me to follow his line of thought. He patiently explained that by staring at the foliage, I would accomplish a minute displacement of my assemblage point. Then, by summoning my dreaming attention through staring at individual leaves, I would actually fixate that minute displacement, and my cohesion would make me perceive in terms of the second attention. He added with a chuckle that the process was so simple it was ridiculous. Don Juan was right. All I needed was to focus my sight on the leaves, maintain it, and in one instant I was drawn into a vortex-like sensation, extremely like the vortexes in my dreams. The foliage of the mesquite tree became a universe of sensory data, It was as if the foliage had swallowed me. But it was not only my sight that was engaged. If I touched the leaves, I actually felt them. I could also smell them. My dreaming attention was multisensorial instead of solely visual, as in my regular dreaming. What had begun as gazing at the foliage of the mesquite tree had turned into a dream. I believed I was in a dreamt tree, as I had been in trees of countless dreams. And naturally, I behaved in this dreamt tree as I had learned to behave in my dreams. I moved from item to item, pulled by the force of a vortex that took shape on whatever part of the tree I focused my multisensorial dreaming attention. Vortexes were formed not only on gazing, but also on touching anything with any part of my body. In the midst of this vision or dream, I had an attack of rational doubts. I began to wonder if I had really climbed the tree in a daze and was actually hugging the leaves, lost in the foliage, without knowing what I was doing. Or perhaps I had fallen asleep, possibly mesmerized by the fluttering of leaves in the wind, and was having a dream. But just like in dreaming, I didn't have enough energy to ponder for too long. My thoughts were fleeting. They lasted an instant. Then, the force of direct experience blanketed them out completely. A sudden motion around me shook everything and virtually made me emerge from a clump of leaves, as if I had broken away from the tree's magnetic pull. I was facing then, from an elevation, an immense horizon. Dark mountains and green vegetation surrounded me. Another jolt of energy made me shake from my bones out. Then I was somewhere else. Enormous trees loomed everywhere. They were bigger than the Douglas firs of Oregon and Washington State. Never had I seen a forest like that. The scenery was such a contrast to the aridness of the Sonoran Desert that it left me with no doubt that I was having a dream. I held on to that extraordinary view, afraid to let go, knowing that it was indeed a dream and would disappear once I had run out of dreaming attention. But the images lasted, even when I thought I should have run out of dreaming attention. A horrifying thought crossed my mind then. What if this was neither a dream nor the daily world? Frightened as an animal must experience fright, I recoiled into the clump of leaves I had emerged from. The momentum of my backward motion kept me going through the tree foliage and around the hard branches. It pulled me away from the tree. In one split second, I was standing next to Don Juan, at the door of his house, in the desert in Sonora. I instantly realized I had entered again into a state in which I could think coherently, but I could not talk. Don Juan told me not to worry. He said that our speech faculty is extremely flimsy, and attacks of muteness are common among sorcerers who venture beyond the limits of normal perception. My gut feeling was that Don Juan had taken pity on me and had decided to give me a pep talk. But the voice of the Dreaming Emissary, which I clearly heard at that instant, said that in a few hours and after some rest, I was going to be perfectly well. Upon awakening, I gave Don Juan, at his request, a complete description of what I had seen and done. He warned me that it was not possible to rely on my rationality to understand my experience. Not because my rationality was in any way impaired, but because what had taken place was a phenomenon outside the parameters of reason. I naturally argued that nothing can be outside the limits of reason. Things can be obscure, but sooner or later reason always finds a way to shed light on anything. And I really believed this. Don Juan, with extreme patience, pointed out that reason is only a byproduct of the habitual position of the assemblage point. Therefore, knowing what is going on, being of sound mind, having our feet on the ground, sources of great pride to us, and assumed to be a natural consequence of our worth, are merely the result of the fixation of the assemblage point on its habitual place. The more rigid and stationary it is, the greater our confidence in ourselves, the greater our feeling of knowing the world, of being able to predict. He added that what dreaming does is give us the fluidity to enter into other worlds by destroying our sense of knowing this world. He called dreaming a journey of unthinkable dimensions, a journey that, after making us perceive everything we can humanly perceive, makes the assemblage point jump outside the human domain and perceive the inconceivable. We are back again, harping on the most important topic of the sorcerer's world. He went on. The position of the assemblage point. The old sorcerer's curse, as well as mankind's thorn in the side. Why do you say that, Don Juan? Because both mankind in general and the old sorcerers fell prey to the position of the assemblage point. Mankind, because by not knowing that the assemblage point exists, we are obliged to take the byproduct of its habitual position as something final and indisputable. And the old sorcerers, because although they knew all about the assemblage point, they fell for its facility to be manipulated. You must avoid falling into those traps, he continued. It'd be really disgusting if you sided with mankind, as if you didn't know about the existence of the assemblage point. But it'd be even more insidious if you sided with the old sorcerers and cynically manipulate the assemblage point for gain. I still don't understand. What is the connection of all this with what I experienced yesterday? Yesterday you were in a different world. But if you ask me where that world is, and I tell you that it is in the position of the assemblage point, my answer won't make any sense to you. Don Juan's argument was that I had two choices. One was to follow mankind's rationales and be faced with a predicament. My experience would tell me that other worlds exist, but my reason would say that such worlds do not and cannot exist. The other choice was to follow the old sorcerer's rationales, in which case I would automatically accept the existence of other worlds, and my greed alone would make my assemblage point hold on to the position that creates those worlds. The result would be another kind of predicament. that of having to move physically into vision-like realms, driven by expectations of power and gain. I was too numb to follow his argument. But then I realized I did not have to follow it because I agreed with him completely. Despite the fact that I did not have a total picture of what I was agreeing about. Agreeing with him was rather a feeling that came from far away, an ancient certainty I had lost, which was now slowly finding its way back to me. The return to my dreaming practices eliminated these turmoils, but created new ones. For example, after months of hearing it daily, I stopped finding the Dreaming Emissary's voice an annoyance or a wonder. It became a matter of course for me. And I made so many mistakes influenced by what it said that I almost understood Don Juan's reluctance to take it seriously. A psychoanalyst would have had a field day interpreting the emissary according to all the possible permutations of my intrapersonal dynamics. Don Juan maintained a steadfast view on it. It is an impersonal but constant force from the realm of inorganic beings. Thus, every dreamer experiences it in more or less the same terms. And if we choose to take its words as advice, we are incurable fools. I was definitely one of them. There was no way I could have remained impassive being in direct contact with such an extraordinary event. A voice that clearly and concisely told me in 3 languages hidden things about anything or anyone I focused my attention on. Its only drawback, which was of no consequence to me, was that we were not synchronized. The emissary used to tell me things about people or events when I had honestly forgotten I had been interested in them. I asked Don Juan about this oddity, and he said that it had to do with the rigidity of my assemblage point. He explained that I had been reared by old adults, and that they had imbued me with old people views. Therefore, I was dangerously righteous. His urge to give me potions of hallucinogenic plants was but an effort, he said, to shake my assemblage point and allow it to have a minimal margin of fluidity. If you don't develop this margin, he went on, either you'll become more righteous or you'll become a hysterical sorcerer. My interest in telling you about the Old Sorcerers is not to badmouth them, but to pit them against you. Sooner or later, your assemblage point will be more fluid, but not fluid enough to offset your facility to be like them, righteous and hysterical. How can I avoid all that, Don Juan? There is only one way. Sorcerers call it sheer understanding. I call it a romance with knowledge. It's the drive sorcerers use to know, to discover, to be bewildered. Don Juan changed the subject and continued to explain the fixation of the assemblage point. He said that seeing children's assemblage points constantly fluttering as if moved by tremors, changing their place with ease, the old sorcerers came to the conclusion that the assemblage point's habitual location is not innate, but brought about by habituation. Seeing Also, that only in adults is it fixed on one spot. They surmised that the specific location of the assemblage point fosters a specific way of perceiving. Through usage, this specific way of perceiving becomes a system of interpreting sensory data. Don Juan pointed out that since we are drafted into that system by being born into it, from the moment of our birth, we imperatively strive to adjust our perceiving to conform to the demands of this system, a system that rules us for life. Consequently, the old sorcerers were thoroughly right in believing that the act of countermanding it and perceiving energy directly is what transforms a person into a sorcerer. Don Juan expressed wonder at what he called the greatest accomplishment of our human upbringing: to lock our assemblage point on its habitual position. For once it is immobilized there, our perception can be coached and guided to interpret what we perceive. In other words, we can then be guided to perceive more in terms of our system than in terms of our senses. He assured me that human perception is universally homogeneous because the assemblage points of the whole human race are fixed on the same spot. He went on to say that sorcerers prove all this to themselves when they see that at the moment the assemblage point is displaced beyond a certain threshold, a new universal filaments of energy begin to be perceived. There is no sense to what we perceive. The immediate cause is that new sensory data has rendered our system inoperative. It can no longer be used to interpret what we are perceiving. Perceiving without our system is, of course, chaotic, Don Juan continued. But strangely enough, when we think we have truly lost our bearings, our old system rallies. It comes to our rescue and transforms our new, incomprehensible perception into a thoroughly comprehensible new world. Just like what happened to you when you gazed at the leaves of the mesquite tree. What exactly happened to me, Don Juan? Your perception was chaotic for a while. Everything came to you at once, and your system for interpreting the world didn't function. Then the chaos cleared up, and there you were, in front of a new world. We are again, Don Juan, at the same place we were before. Does that world exist, or is it merely my mind that concocted it? We certainly are back, and the answer is still the same. It exists in the precise position your assemblage point was at that moment. In order to perceive it, you needed cohesion. That is, you needed to maintain your assemblage point fixed on that position, which you did. The result was that you totally perceived a new world for a while. But would others perceive that same world? If they had uniformity and cohesion, they would. Uniformity is to hold in unison the same position of the assemblage point. The old sorcerers called the entire act of acquiring uniformity and cohesion outside the normal world stalking perception. The art of stalking he continued, as I have already said, deals with the fixation of the assemblage point. The old sorcerers discovered through practice that important as it is to displace the assemblage point, it is even more important to make it stay fixed on its new position, wherever that new position might be. He explained that if the assemblage point does not become stationary, there is no way that we can perceive coherently. We would experience then a kaleidoscope of disassociated images. This is the reason the old sorcerers put as much emphasis on dreaming as they did on stalking. One art cannot exist without the other, especially for the kinds of activities in which the old sorcerers were involved. What were those activities, Don Juan? The old sorcerers called them the intricacies of the second attention, or the grand adventure of the unknown. Don Juan said that these activities stem from the displacements of the assemblage point. Not only have the old sorcerers learned to displace their assemblage points to thousands of positions on the surface or on the inside of their energy masses, but they had also learned to fixate their assemblage points on those positions and thus retain their cohesiveness indefinitely. What was the benefit of that, Don Juan? We can't talk about benefits. We can talk only about end results. He explained that the cohesiveness of the old sorcerers was such that it allowed them to become perceptually and physically everything the specific position of their assemblage points dictated. They could transform themselves into anything for which they had a specific inventory. An inventory is, he said, all the details of perception involved in becoming, for example, a jaguar, a bird, an insect, etc., etc. It's very hard for me to believe that this transformation can be possible, I said. It is possible, he assured me. Not so much for you and me, but for them. For them it was nothing. He said that the old sorcerers had superb fluidity. All they needed was the slightest shift of their assemblage points, the slightest perceptual cue from their dreaming, and they would instantaneously stalk their perception, rearrange their cohesiveness to fit their new state of awareness, and be an animal, another person, a bird, or anything. But isn't that what mentally ill people do? Make up their own reality as they go along? I said. No, it isn't the same. Insane people imagine a reality of their own because they don't have any preconceived purpose at all. Insane people bring chaos into the chaos. Sorcerers, on the contrary, bring order to the chaos. Their preconceived transcendental purpose is to free their perception. Sorcerers don't make up the world they are perceiving. They perceive energy directly. And then they discover that what they are perceiving is an unknown new world, which can swallow them whole, because it is as real as anything we know to be real. Don Juan then gave me a new version of what had happened to me as I gazed at the mesquite tree. He said that I began by perceiving the energy of the tree. On the subjective level, however, I believed I was dreaming because I employed dreaming techniques to perceive energy. He asserted that to use dreaming techniques in the world of everyday life was one of the old sorcerers' most effective devices. It made perceiving energy directly dreamlike, instead of totally chaotic, until a moment when something rearranged perception, and the sorcerer found himself facing a new world, the very thing that had happened to me. I told him about the thought I'd had, which I had barely dared to think, that the scenery I was viewing was not a dream, nor was it our daily world. It wasn't, he said. I've been saying this to you over and over, and you think that I'm merely repeating myself. I know how difficult it is for the mind to allow mindless possibilities to become real. But new worlds exist. They are wrapped, one around the other, like the skins of an onion. The world we exist in is but one of those skins. Do you mean, Don Juan, that the goal of your teaching is to prepare me to go into those worlds? No, I don't mean that. We go into those worlds only as an exercise. Those journeys are the antecedents of the sorcerers of today. We do the same dreaming that the old sorcerers used to do, but at one moment we deviate into new ground. The old sorcerers preferred the shifts of the assemblage point, so they were always on more or less known, predictable ground. We prefer the movements of the assemblage point. The old sorcerers were after the human unknown. We are after the non-human unknown. I haven't gotten to that yet, have I? No, you are only beginning. And at the beginning, everyone has to go through the old sorcerer's steps. After all, they were the ones who invented dreaming. At what point will I then begin to learn the new sorcerer's brand of dreaming? You have enormous ground yet to cover. Years from now, perhaps. Besides, in your case, I have to be extraordinarily careful. In character, you are definitely linked to the old sorcerers. I've said this to you before, but you always manage to avoid my probes. Sometimes I even think that some alien energy is advising you, but then I discard the idea. You're not devious. What are you talking about, Don Juan? You've done, unwittingly, two things that worry the hell out of me. You traveled with your energy body to a place outside this world the first time you dreamt. And you walked there. And you walked there. And then you traveled with your energy body to another place outside this world, but parting from the awareness of the daily world. Why would that worry you, Don Juan? Dreaming is too easy for you. And that is a damnation if we don't watch it. It leads to the human unknown. As I said to you, modern day sorcerers strive to get to the non-human unknown. What can the non-human unknown be? Freedom from being human. Inconceivable worlds that are outside the band of man, but that we still can perceive. This is where modern sorcerers take the side road. Their predilection is what's outside the human domain. And what are outside that domain are all-inclusive worlds. Not merely the realm of birds, or the realm of animals, or the realm of man, even if it be the unknown man. What I am talking about are worlds like the one where we live. Total worlds with endless realms. Where are those worlds, Don Juan? In different positions of the assemblage point? Right. In different positions of the assemblage point. But positions sorcerers arrive at with a movement of the assemblage point, not a shift. Entering into those worlds is the type of dreaming only sorcerers of today do. The old sorcerers stayed away from it because it requires a great deal of detachment and no self-importance whatsoever, a price they couldn't afford to pay. For the sorcerers who practice dreaming today, dreaming is freedom to perceive worlds beyond the imagination. But what's the point of perceiving all that? You already asked me today the same question. You speak like a true merchant. What's the risk, you ask? What's the percentage gain to my investment? Is it going to better me? There is no way to answer that. The merchant mind does commerce, but freedom cannot be an investment. Freedom is an adventure with no end, in which we risk our lives and much more for a few moments of something beyond words, beyond thoughts or feelings. I didn't ask that question in that spirit, Don Juan. What I want to know is what can be the driving force to do all this for a lazy bum like myself. To seek freedom is the only driving force I know. Freedom to fly off into that infinity out there. Freedom to dissolve, to lift off, to be like the flame of a candle, which, in spite of being up against the light of a billion stars, remains intact because it never pretended to be more than what it is, a mere candle. Chapter 5. The World of Inorganic Beings. Faithful to my agreement to wait for Don Juan to initiate any comment on dreaming, only in cases of necessity did I ask him for advice. Ordinarily, though, he not only seemed reluctant to touch the subject, but was somehow displeased with me about it. In my estimation, a confirmation of his disapproval was the fact that whenever we talked about my dreaming activities, he always minimized the import of anything I had accomplished. For me at the time, the animate existence of inorganic beings had become the most crucial aspect of my dreaming practices. After encountering them in my dreams, and especially after my bout with them in the desert around Don Juan's house, I should have been more willing to take their existence as a serious affair. But all these events had quite the opposite effect on me. I became adamant and doggedly denied the possibility that they existed. Then I had a change of heart and decided to conduct an objective inquiry about them. The method of this inquiry required that I first compile a record of everything that transpired in my dreaming sessions. Then use that record as a matrix to find out if my dreaming proved or disproved anything about the inorganic beings. I actually wrote down hundreds of pages of meticulous but meaningless details, when it should have been clear to me that the evidence of their existence had been gathered almost as soon as I started my inquiry. It took but a few sessions for me to discover that what I thought to be Don Juan's casual recommendation to suspend judgment and let the inorganic beings come to me was in fact the very procedure used by the sorcerers of antiquity to attract them. By leaving me to find it out for myself, Don Juan was simply following his sorcery training. He had remarked time and time again that it is very difficult to make the self give up its strongholds, except through practice. One of the self's strongest lines of defense is indeed our rationality. And this is not only the most durable line of defense when it comes to sorcery actions and explanations, but also the most threatened. Don Juan believed that the existence of inorganic beings is a foremost assailant of our rationality. In my dreaming practices, I had an established course, which I followed every single day without deviation. I aimed first at observing every conceivable item of my dreams, then at changing dreams. I can say in sincerity that I observed universes of detail in dreams upon dreams. As a matter of course, at one given moment, my dreaming attention began to wane, and my dreaming sessions ended either in my falling asleep and having regular dreams, in which I had no dreaming attention whatsoever, or in my waking up and not being able to sleep at all. From time to time, however, as Don Juan had described it, a current of foreign energy, a scout, as he called it, was injected into my dreams. Being forewarned helped me to adjust my dreaming attention and be on the alert. The first time I noticed foreign energy, I was dreaming about shopping in a department store. I was going from counter to counter, looking for antiques. I finally found one. The incongruence of looking for antiques in a department store was so obvious that it made me chuckle. But since I had found one, I forgot about that incongruence. The antique was the handle of a walking stick. The salesman told me that it was made of iridium, which he called one of the hardest substances in the world. It was a carved piece, the head and shoulders of a monkey. It looked like jade to me. The salesman was insulted when I insinuated that it might be jade. And to prove his point, he hurled the object with all his strength against the cement floor. It did not break, but bounced like a ball, and then sailed away, spinning like a frisbee. I followed it. It disappeared behind some trees. I ran to look for it, and I found it, stuck on the ground. It had been transformed into an extraordinarily beautiful, deep green and black, full-length walking stick. I coveted it. I grabbed it and struggled to pull it out of the ground before anyone else came along. But as hard as I tried, I could not make it budge. I was afraid I would break it if I attempted to pry it loose by shaking it back and forth. So I began to dig around it with my bare hands. As I kept on digging, It kept on melting until only a puddle of green water was left in its place. I stared at the water. It suddenly seemed to explode. It turned into a white bubble, and then it was gone. My dream continued into other images and details, which were not outstanding, although they were crystal clear. When I told Don Juan about this dream, he said, "You isolated a scout." Scouts are more numerous when our dreams are average, normal ones. The dreams of dreamers are strangely free from scouts. When they appear, they are identifiable by strangeness and incongruity surrounding them. Incongruity in what manner, Don Juan? Their presence doesn't make any sense. Very few things make sense in a dream. Only in average dreams are things nonsensical. I would say that this is so because more scouts are injected then, because average people are subject to a greater barrage from the unknown. Do you know why that is so, Don Juan? In my opinion, what takes place is a balance of forces. Average people have stupendously strong barriers to protect themselves against those onslaughts. Barriers such as worries about the self. The stronger the barrier, the greater the attack. Dreamers, by contrast, have fewer barriers and fewer scouts in their dreams. It seems that in dreamers' dreams, nonsensical things disappear, perhaps to ensure that dreamers catch the presence of scouts. Don Juan advised me to pay close attention and remember every single possible detail of the dream I had had. He even made me repeat what I had told him. "You baffle me," I said. "You don't want to hear anything about my dreaming, and then you do. Is there any order to your refusals and acceptances?" "You bet there is order behind all this," he said. "Chances are you'll do the same someday to another dreamer. Some items are of key importance because they are associated with the spirit. Others are entirely unimportant by reasons of being associated with our indulging personality. The first scout you isolate will always be present in any form, even iridium. By the way, what's iridium?" "I don't really know," I said, in total sincerity. "There you are. And what will you say if it turns out to be one of the strongest substances in the world?" Don Juan's eyes shone with delight, while I nervously laughed at the absurd possibility, which I learned later is true. I began to notice from then on the presence of incongruous items in my dreams. Once I had accepted Don Juan's categorization of foreign energy in dreams, I totally agreed with him that incongruous items were foreign invaders of my dreams. Upon isolating them, my dreaming attention always focused on them with an intensity that did not occur under any other circumstances.